In the year 271 of our era, Emperor Aurelian gave an order that was meant to erase an entire culture. Roman legions were leaving Dacia, a province the empire had held for only 170 years. The soldiers crossed back over the Danube, the officials packed away their records, and the frontiers slammed shut. Rome ruled Britain for 400 years. When the legions left, Latin vanished within one generation. Rome ruled North Africa for more than 800 years, and the Arabs wiped out Latin so completely that not a single Romance language survived across the entire continent. But in Dacia, where Rome spent less time than anywhere else, something impossible happened. The language remained. 17 centuries later, 20 million people still speak it. Romanian is a Latin language. Walk through Bucharest and you will hear words a Roman centurion would almost recognize. Apa means water. Limba means language. Pământ means earth. In a region completely surrounded by Slavic and Hungarian languages, Romanian stands alone, a living echo of an empire that abandoned this land almost 2,000 years ago. How did a language survive 17 centuries of isolation, invasion, and chaos when all the evidence says it should not have? Are Romanians really the last Romans, carrying the blood and speech of the empire through the dark centuries? Or did something much older and more surprising preserve this language, something hidden in mountain valleys and written not in books, but in DNA? Because when scientists finally opened the Romanian genome, they found a story nobody expected. To understand how strange Romanian is, you only need to look at a map. The Romance languages, French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, sit together in Western Europe like branches of the same tree. They grew out of Latin in regions where Rome ruled for centuries and cultural roots ran deep. And then, 1,000 kilometers to the east, cut off by a wall of Slavic peoples, stands Romanian. Alone, surrounded, speaking a language that, by all logic, should sound like it belongs on the other side of the continent. The historical explanation sounds simple. Rome conquered Dacia in the year 106 under Emperor Trajan. That conquest is immortalized on Trajan's column in Rome, a 40-meter spiral of battle reliefs that still stands in the center of the city today. Colonists arrived, cities were built, and Latin became the language of trade and law. When Rome left, some version of Latin survived in mountain communities and, over centuries, turned into Romanian. The problem is the timeline. 170 years. That is how long Rome stayed in Dacia. For comparison, the United States is less than 250 years old. In Britain, where Rome stayed twice as long, Latin gave way to Anglo-Saxon. In North Africa, where Roman cities stood for more than 800 years, Arabic pushed Latin out completely. Dacia breaks every pattern. For 200 years, historians could not agree on why. Some insisted that Romanians descended from Roman colonists who refused to leave. Others argued that the true ancestors, the Dacians, survived the occupation, and Rome merely left its language behind like a coat of paint over ancient wood. The debate split Romania itself. Statues of Dacian warriors across the country, the Dacianist movement on one side, and intellectuals insisting that Romania was a Latin island in a Slavic sea on the other. And Hungarian historians used the issue as leverage. If Romanians arrived in Transylvania later than the Magyars, their territorial claims weaken. Then DNA entered the debate, and the answer turned out to be neither. The land that would become Romania was never empty. Long before Dacia, long before Rome, this region sat at one of the most important crossroads of prehistoric Europe. The Carpathians curved through its center like a spine. The Danube cut across its southern border. Wave after wave, humans passed through, settled, and mixed. The oldest traces are Paleolithic remains from Peștera cu Oase, 35,000 years old. Some of the oldest Homo sapiens bones in all of Europe. But the genomes of those people showed that they left no direct descendants among modern Europeans. Their line ended without a trace. Millennia later, in the Mesolithic, the Iron Gates Gorge was inhabited by hunter-gatherers with unusual genetics, but their legacy was only partial as well. The foundation of the modern Romanian genome was laid by those who came after. About 9,000 years ago, the first farmers reached the region from Anatolia. But the Urveli study from 2015, which analyzed ancient mitochondrial DNA from 59 people across 10 Romanian sites, showed that those earliest farmers were not the main genetic ancestors of modern Romanians. Their DNA profile is statistically distant from the present-day population. The real foundation came from a different wave. Between 5,500 and 4,500 BCE, farmers from the Boyan, Zhao, and Gumelnitsa cultures arrived from northwestern Anatolia through the Balkans. They came in such numbers that they permanently reshaped the gene pool. When the Urveli team compared their mtDNA with modern Romanian samples, the match was striking. Haplogroup H, which reaches 41% in today's Romanians, was already dominant at 58% then. The statistical distance was insignificant. The genetic core of Romania was formed more than 7,000 years ago, 5 millennia before the first Dacian fortress. These were the people who created the Cucuteni Tripilia culture, one of the most impressive civilizations of prehistoric Europe. Huge settlements, sometimes home to thousands of people. Painted pottery with spiral designs. Settlement plans that still look remarkably sophisticated today. But a foundation is only a foundation. Whether it survives depends on what is built on top of it. And the next thing to arrive came on horseback, from the east. About 5,000 years ago, peoples from the Pontic-Caspian steppe began moving west and south. They led horses, carried bronze tools, and brought Indo-European languages that would eventually give rise to Greek, Latin, Slavic, and dozens of other tongues. In northern and western Europe, the steppe migrants left a massive genetic imprint. But Matheson's data from the 2018 Nature study show that in the Carpathian Danubian region, the steppe component is present, in haplogroups R1a and part of R1b, but in smaller proportions than in northern Europe. Neolithic ancestry held its ground here more strongly than almost anywhere else on the continent. From this blend, Thracian and Dacian peoples emerged over the next thousands of years. By the Iron Age, the Dacians controlled a powerful kingdom in the Carpathians. Their stone fortresses in the Orishtia Mountains still stand today. They worshipped Zalmoxis, the god of wisdom and rebirth, and believed that death was only a transformation and that the soul was immortal. Ancient Greek sources describe them as fierce and proud warriors, people of deep spirituality and iron discipline. Their king, Decebalus, became one of Rome's most dangerous enemies on the Danube frontier. After long wars, Trajan broke Dacian resistance in 2 campaigns and, in the year 106, turned Dacia into a province. The empire poured in. Colonists from Italy, the Balkans, and Anatolia. Cities rose. Gold from Transylvanian mines filled the treasury. And then, 170 years later, Rome left. What does the DNA show? Comparisons of Iron Age ancient samples with modern Romanians reveal clear genetic continuity with pre-Roman populations. The Dacian line never disappeared. Roman samples show admixture. Mediterranean ancestry enters the gene pool, but it sits on top of the older foundation rather than replacing it. A 2024 review of Y-chromosome data confirmed that the dominant haplogroups in Romanians, I2A, R1A, E1b1b, are typical of the Balkans, not Italy. The specifically Roman genetic signal exists, but it is modest. Rome gave Dacia a language, but it did not give it, in the dominant sense, its blood. When the empire left the province, many Dacians retreated into the mountains, preserving their way of life beyond Roman control. For centuries, historians assumed they were either wiped out or fully assimilated. DNA disproves both. The Dacian genetic line, mixed but not erased, quietly flowed through the centuries, through farmers, shepherds, and families, down to the present day. If the population remained mostly local, How did Latin take root so firmly that it survived 17 centuries of chaos after Rome left? The answer lies in what happened next. And what happened next was catastrophe. After the year 271, the world Rome had built collapsed. The Goths came first, then the Huns, racing through the steppe in the 5th century. The Avars formed powerful confederations, and beginning in the 6th century, Slavic-speaking peoples spread across Eastern and Southeastern Europe, settling permanently in the lands of what would become Serbia, Bulgaria, Croatia, and Bosnia. Large ancient DNA studies from the Balkans confirm real population movement and genuine mixture during those centuries. Romanian DNA carries that signal too. According to Y-STR data, modern Romanians form a statistical cluster with Serbs, Bulgarians, and Croatians, genetically closer to their Slavic neighbors than to Italians. That is where the paradox becomes sharpest. The genes say Balkans. The language says Rome. All the surrounding peoples who went through the same invasions lost Latin completely. Dalmatia, which had spoken Latin for centuries, became Croatian and Serbian. The entire northern Balkans shifted to Slavic languages. Even the closely related Aromanian communities scattered across Greece, Albania, and North Macedonia were reduced to tiny, fragmented pockets. One Romanian survived, and the key to why is in the mountains. The 2014 Urveli study examined the mtDNA of 128 Romanians, people from inside the Carpathian Arc, the Cluj-Napoca area, and from outside it, the plains of Dolj and Mehedinți. Inside the mountains, haplogroup H reached nearly 60%. Outside, it was 47%, while haplogroups H, V, and K, more common in the Near East, appeared more often. The authors called the Carpathians a weak genetic barrier, not a wall, but a filter that slows movement. It was this filtering effect that saved Latin. A language does not need an empire to survive. It needs communities, families speaking to children, valleys where the same words are repeated generation after generation. When migration happens slowly, newcomers are absorbed into an existing linguistic fabric instead of tearing it apart. When valleys are separated by passes that close in winter, each community becomes a self-sustaining unit of cultural transmission. Just how powerful this micro-isolation is becomes clear in a 2024 study of two villages in the Apuseni Mountains, Baița and Roșia Montana. They are only a few miles apart, yet their Y-chromosome profiles differ sharply. In Baița, R1b is 27%, and I2a is 17. In Roșia Montana, R1b rises to 37%, E1b1b reaches 20, and R1a, present in Baița, disappears entirely. Each valley preserved its own combination of lineages for centuries. The Carpathians did not seal the population off from the outside world. Slavic and steppe ancestry entered the gene pool, but it entered slowly, village by village, valley by valley, blending into communities that already had a working language and no reason to abandon it. The mountains created what geneticists call population structure, small, semi-isolated groups where cultural traits like genetic ones drift slowly instead of being wiped out by sudden replacement. In open plains, Latin died. In Dalmatia, along the coast, Latin died. But in the Carpathian valleys, where time moved more slowly and outsiders seeped in drop by drop instead of crashing in as a flood, Latin held on. It changed, absorbing Slavic loanwords, shifting its grammar, becoming something Caesar would no longer recognize. But it did not break. The thread did not snap. Now that we understand how the language survived, one final question remains. What exactly is written in Romanian? DNA today. The largest mitochondrial DNA study of the Romanian population, 714 people from Wallachia, Dobruja, Moldavia, and Transylvania, shows haplogroup H dominating at 41%. The same lineage that dominated among the Neolithic farmers of the Boyan and Gumilnica cultures 7,000 years ago, long before the first Roman heard the word Dacia. The paternal picture leads to the same conclusion. I2A is one of the most common haplogroups among Romanian men, an indigenous European line tens of thousands of years old. R1A is a steppe and Eastern European component. E1B1B is a Balkan line. Together, these three haplogroups form the backbone of the Romanian Y-chromosome profile, and all of them are tied to the Balkans and Eastern Europe, not the Italian peninsula. The key comparison is this. When researchers projected the Y-STR profiles of 122 Romanian men from southeastern Romania onto Europe's genetic map, Romanians fell into the same cluster as Serbs, Macedonians, Bosnians, and Croatians. The genetic distance to Hungarians was greater. To Italians and Western Europeans, greater still. Think about that. Romanians speak a language born in Rome, but their DNA is closer to Slavic neighbors than to the people who gave them that language. Most of the Romanian genome is the inheritance of pre-Roman populations, Neolithic farmers, hunter-gatherers, and Iron Age inhabitants of the Carpathians, whom ancient sources knew as Dacians and Thracians. Roman colonists added a Mediterranean trace, especially in the south and west, but it lies as a thin layer over a much deeper foundation. So are they the last Romans? By blood, no. Genetically, Romanians are a Balkan people with roots that go back thousands of years deeper than any empire. By language, yes, and that is their true uniqueness. 20 million people still speak a language that Rome left on this land for only 170 years. It survived the Goths, the Huns, the Avars, and centuries of Slavic migration, because the Carpathian valleys could slow time, and the families in those valleys passed words to their children with the same stubbornness they passed down the land. 170 years. That is how long Rome gave Dacia, a blink in the eyes of those who lived here before it. The Neolithic farmers who make up the deepest genetic layer of Romanians lived on this land 5,000 years before the first Roman soldier crossed the Danube. Rome came late and left early, but it left behind its voice, and that voice proved stronger than legions, roads, and fortress walls. Because language does not survive because of empires. It survives because of valleys, families, and mountains that know how to slow time. If this story made you see Europe's map differently, subscribe to the channel. We keep uncovering the genetic secrets hidden in the blood of peoples, and in the comments, tell us which people we should explore next.